With a lot of characters changing in the mid-season patch and the meta developing as a whole, we need to talk about the best and worst heroes in this meta. So we're going to break down the new Overwatch tier list from S all the way to D tier so that you know exactly what characters are the best right now, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks along the way. Now, before we get started, I just want to make it clear that you can climb any hero all the way up to Grandmaster and beyond, so just because your favorite hero isn't an S tier doesn't mean that you can't continue to play that character. In fact, I encourage you to play the characters that you like to play more than what characters are just good or bad in any existing meta. That being said, smash that subscribe button and let me know down below what hero you want to see a guide on next on this channel, and I'll get started on it right away. Now, the list will be in alphabetical order from tanks, DPS to supports. And the first character that is on the list is D.Va. Now, D.Va has kind of been the talk of the town for a while. Was incredibly powerful at the start of Season 12. We saw nerfs to basically everything but D.Va in a hotfix patch, and then in the mid-season, we saw some nerfs to the character, but many are claiming that the nerfs are not quite enough. And I would say that D.Va is in a healthier spot than she was before, but she's still incredibly powerful in this meta for quite a few reasons. Number one, she's really strong with Juno. Being able to speed boost you onto people, especially in ranked, is just super powerful because people don't peel enough and people are just going to get deleted and exploded out of nowhere. We're even seeing that in pro play, and D.Va is just super strong and still strong, even though her survivability has got nerfed quite a bit with that armor change. I think that's a bigger deal than some people actually give it credit for, because D.Va can be poked out and threatened more now than she was before, and sometimes some of those small changes add up and make the character overall weaker. So I would say, like, pre-mid-season patch, D.Va was undoubtedly like the best tank to pick, bar none, and now she's incredibly strong, but I think you could make an argument for some other characters on some maps. So I'm gonna actually put D.Va still in the S tier, but I will also state that I don't think that she's necessarily gonna be the most dominant thing, especially if we're talking about every single rank. Players are really not playing D.Va all that great in most ranks of play, and I would say for the average rank, D.Va is not gonna be the best tank that you could be playing, but if you want to put the time and effort into mastering D.Va, it's definitely a character that can climb you all the way to the highest ranks, and she's really strong in the right hands. But there's really a lot that you need to master on D.Va to get that full value out of her. So even though I'm putting her in the S tier here, I'm going to say that this is primarily for the highest ranks of play more than it is for the average ranks of play. But it is important to understand this as a point of reference, that D.Va is still really strong in the right hands right now. Even after her nerfs, she's still phenomenal. Now, the next character that we got to talk about is Doomfist. And with the CC changes, Doomfist does get a little bit of buffs going into this season, this mid-season in particular. But still, when we compare him to a lot of other options, he really lags behind a lot of the dive tanks. He lags behind a lot of tanks at playing the neutral game. And I think that Doomfist can be good in the right environment, in the right person's hands. But overall, he's not going to be like a staple of the meta by any means. Right now, I do think that he's a little bit better than he was pre-mid-season patch, but he's not going to be like the best character to play, and I really don't even think he's the best character in the roles that he plays. But I will say that the one thing that Doom has going for him is that he's actually good in a lot of different tank matchups depending on the map. So, like, as an example, he can be really good against Sigma on maps where it's not super long range, where he can take the fight close to Sigma. He has a lot of game against Sigma's Rock, Sigma's Shield. There's a lot of characters like Ramatra that he can just constantly boop away over and over again. Ryan has a very hard dealing with Doom, and there are some characters that he can interact with positive ways, like Wrecking Ball. He can cancel the slam and things like that. So there are a lot of characters, especially in the tank category, that I think Doom has decent game against, even if you're playing in the brawl neutral game. And learning how to play your matchups is one of the most important things on Doom, but individual skill is something that you're going to have to learn, and being able to play around some of your harder matchups is going to be the difference between like a okay Doom and an amazing Doom. How do you interact with characters that might have problematic cooldowns for you, like Sleepdar, like Suzu? There's a lot of different cooldowns that can be really frustrating to play against, but if you can learn to overcome those things, that's when you're really going to start to see the most amount of value on Doom, if you're someone that wants to commit to him and play him as a one-trick character. Still, I think I'm going to put him in the B tier. He's really like high C, low B. I don't think he's fantastic at what he's doing right now, but he's not bad, and I actually ranked him way lower in my previous tier list that I recorded and never actually got out in time before all the hot fixes and stuff. So yeah, I think he's a little bit better now, but still not great. Junker Queen is actually in a pretty reasonable spot right now. She's good because she enables a lot of powerful compositions, whether those are Brawl S comps or Dive S comps. I think Characters like Reaper are really good right now. Characters like Sombra, Tracer, and Junker Queen can actually play really well in a traditional brawl, enabling people to go in with like a Reaper. And she can also play really well in a dive composition, especially if we're talking about maps with not a lot of vertical mobility. Like, she would be pretty bad on maps like New Bonnie first, but if we think about a lot of the flatter maps, if you want to play dive on those maps, Junker Queen is perfectly viable. And I think because she's good at several different compositions, she has the means to enable a comp and enable her team and kind of allow them to go in. It's almost kind of interesting where if we think about the dives between like a Junker Queen and a Winston, right? Winston dives in and puts a bubble down that protects his team and enables them when they're on the target and when they're actively in the fight. Junker Queen is someone that gives her team a little burst to help them in that initial phases of the fight. And I really do think it's powerful how both these characters create opportunities for their dive team. So I'm going to put Junker Queen actually up in A tier. I think she's actually really good right now. Definitely not a character to sleep on. And if you're looking for a tank to hard carry in any elo underneath the Masters rank, Junker Queen is one of the best characters to do that, because you can literally deadlift a lobby with her. Next up, we're going to talk about Mauga, and Mauga's a bit of a weird tank for me because I think he's one of the easiest tanks to counter in the game right now. He's super easy to shut down, and he's super matchup dependent. Like, there are some matchups that I feel like he just doesn't lose to. He's really good against Winston. He's really good against Roadhog. He's pretty decent against Rhine. But then there are some matchups and characters that he has a crazy frustrating time with. He has a really frustrating time dealing with divas. He's not great at dealing with characters like Sigma when they pick the right engagements. He really has a hard time against Ana. And overall, I think that the character is feast or famine more than a lot of other characters in the whole tanking role. And he's a great character to whip out in certain situations, but if you're playing Mauga throughout the whole game, I think he's way too easy to just get countered and disrupted and dealt with. So there are going to be certain matchups that I think are favorable for him, but overall, he's more of a one-trick pony in the matchups that he's good and bad in. And if we think about a character like Diva you have a really hard time countering her, right? There's not a lot of characters that can hard counter her, and she's flexible in her playstyle. She can change how she plays. She can avoid bad matchups and just like focus on the matchups she's good in, or change her playstyle. Mauga is really, you know, he's very one-dimensional, which means that he is very easy to counter in one specific way. So yeah, I'm gonna actually put him lower than Doom. I think Doom is far more flexible than him. I could probably make the argument that he's in C tier, so I'm actually going to put him in C tier. This might be sacrilege for some of you, but I do think that he is just way too easy to shut down and counter, but that doesn't mean he's unplayable. There are going to be some situations where he's good, and you just have to identify when those situations are if you want to play him. And I also do think that his ultimate is still just fantastic, so that is an important point there. Next up is Orisa. Orisa did get a movement speed buff in the mid-season patch. I don't know why, but they did give her a movement speed buff, and I actually think it makes the character fine. I mean, overall, I think with a lot of the changes to the survivability of the tank role, having Orisa be super survivable is now something that we notice, because before it was like every tank is super survivable. But now Orisa kind of shines above that. Still, Orisa is really good at shutting down a lot of tanks, whether it's Hog, whether it's Doomfist, whether it's Ball. Like, just being able to shut down tanks, turn matches into like a 50-50. But it's especially good when you're playing a composition that is more like individual pick oriented, and they're playing a composition that is more synergy oriented. Being able to deny their diver from creating plays is good. Like, if you're playing a composition, let's just say a Cassidy Bap composition, right? And they're playing like a Tracer, Genji, Doom composition. If you can disrupt, that's the best case scenario. Like, even though you are oftentimes tunnel visioning their tank, taking them out of the fight, it actually creates a huge advantage for your team, because your team doesn't need that level of synergy that the dive would like to. Dive comps like to compound a lot of what they're doing because it makes a lot of players waste a lot of their cooldowns, and they don't have enough, right? It's like if you're an Ana and you have one sleep dart, and there's 3 things after you, you can't sleep them all, right? So that's just one example of where Orisa really shines, and I actually do think that she's shining because of the mid-season changes and just the nice little mobility boost. I'm going to put her at the top of B tier. I actually think she's pretty decent. Next, we got to talk about Ramatra, and I do think that Ramatra in particular is hard to place because while the character is good at doing a lot of different things, right? Decent at brawling, decent at poking, can play with a variety of different characters and compositions, never is going to be the best at whatever composition you're playing. Like, you're a pretty flexible character, but you sacrifice power in doing what you want to do. And I would say that Ramattra is always going to be a fine character to play, but unless the character is kind of dialed up to where all parts of the character's kit is really powerful, the character really lags behind. And right now in particular, I think that Ramattra is kind of struggling more than Ramattra has in some other seasons. There's just a lot of really competitive options, and the tank matchups are really not great. I really don't like Ramattra against most of the tank matchups in the game right now. Ramattra is okay, but never going to be great in most of those matchups, and I really do think that the character is going to be dependent on how good you are with them. Great character to learn how to play the game, great character to have in your back pocket in the right situations, but I would not say is one of the strongest characters to play right now. I'm actually going to put Ramattra in the B tier, but underneath Doomfist. Now, Rein is a shocking one right now, because I actually think that this might be one of the strongest seasons for Rein that we've seen in quite some time. I know that that's really weird to say, but Rein is just getting quite a bit of value. Being able to close in the gap, get in close, speed in, having Juno be able to enable a Rein and like speed a Rein in, I think is really, really good. And I wouldn't say that Rein is fantastic for like Masters and Grandmaster, right, or Champ, but in the average rank, I think Rein is actually just phenomenal, and he can be played at any rank. He's actually really, really strong right now, especially because Juno's played a lot. When you get speed between Lucio and Juno, when you get a lot of brawl characters that are really good, when you get characters like Mei and Reaper and Cassidy being really, really good, I'm actually gonna say that Rein deserves A tier. Now, like I said, not in the highest ranks of play or whatever, but Ryan's just actually better right now than he has been in a very, very long time. I think I actually have to give him his flowers right now. Shatter's still really, really great. Being able to pin in, especially if you get really aggressive with you pin, you know how to chase people down with pin. You know how to aid aggression with Ryan, especially like if you have dive characters and you're just locking Ryan for whatever reason. You need to match their aggression on like the back line with your aggression on the front line, and understanding how aggressive your team is playing, the tempo that they're playing, that's really, really important on Ryan. I'm actually going to put him in the bottom of A tier. I think he's actually better than Orisa, Doom, and Ramattra right now. So yeah, I'm putting him in the A tier. Next, we got to talk about Hog, and I think in theory, Hog should be strong. He did get a slight buff here, and he's always been a really powerful character, a difficult character to deal with. However, I think maybe because players are better at dealing with Hog, players understand the strengths of Hog more, and there's characters, especially in the tank role, that really shut down Hog, make Hog have a really frustrating time to play the game. If we're talking about a character like Diva, being able to shut down all of his hooks, you know, a lot of characters can really abuse him and close in the gap or just ignore the Hog altogether. I think he's actually not fantastic right now, and you could probably put him in the bottom of A. I think you could make the argument that he's better than the characters in B tier, but I don't think much better. And I'm actually going to do something a little interesting here. I'm actually going to put Hog at the top of B. I really do think that if we took all of the ranks combined and just took the averages, I think Ryan is just actually better than Hog in a lot of games. Doesn't mean you can't carry with Hog, but especially if we're talking about one-tricking, Hog is way easier to counter, and he's a character that just has a lot of characters that he just doesn't interact with great at all. Yes, you're going to run into these Hogs that feel unkillable, uncounterable, but yeah, really, Hog is a character that is very one-dimensional in the way that he plays and his range. He's really weak to poke. He doesn't do a lot to stop a lot of dive compositions. I think he just doesn't create enough space oftentimes unless you're just popping the hell off and just really smurfing a lobby. So I'm going to put him at the top of B. We all know how powerful Hog can be, but I think he's actually struggling right now in particular. So I'm going to put him in the top of B. Now, Sigma, you know, he's strong, but he's not that strong. I'm going to put him in the D tier. I'm just kidding. He's an S tier character. I always put Sigma in the S tier. I'm going to keep putting Sigma in the S tier. There's maps that you play Sigma on, and that's it. If you're playing Havana, if you're playing Junkertown, if you're playing Circuit Royale, Sigma is just the best character to play. He can test DPS on the high ground. He pressures out characters from taking aggressive angles. He just plays so well on those maps and enables snipers himself. He's almost a necessity on these maps. And yes, you could succeed with a lot of other things, but you're going to have to be way more synergistic or just way better to make it work compared to a Sigma that just gets to fit these maps so naturally well. And it's basically the closest thing that we have to a map-based meta, and Sigma is just like phenomenal on these maps. And I say it all the time, if you are a tank player, I would highly suggest knowing Sig to just play on these maps. Maybe not all the time, but just know how and at least understand how to play them if you have to, or how the enemy Sigma plays and thinks so that you're better up against them. But yeah, Sigma's an S tier character, and he's super, super powerful. Now, Winston is also really, really, really great. And he's a harder one to place because I think the disparity between high rank and low rank on Winston is much further. Like, if we think about just the highest ranks of play, I think Winston is just, like, definitely S tier. Undoubtedly S tier. He's phenomenal. For even, like, high, like, the average rank and below, Winston starts to fall off quite severely. Players are not going to abuse the bubble nearly as much. It's really hard to time perfectly what you're doing on Winston. Like, you have a lot of decisions, and there's a lot of little micro decisions that matter a lot on Winston. When you bubble, when you go in, how aggressive you go in, there's a lot of little things that kind of add up to really big plays, and whether you feed or pop off on Winston. Still, though, he's just one of the most powerful characters at enabling dive. And with Winston kind of trailing just a little bit behind D.Va, I think, before. Now that D.Va's a little bit weaker, Winston has caught up. They're both still phenomenal, by the way. And I'm actually going to put Winston in the S tier. But keep in mind, I would probably drop him down all the way to the bottom of A if we were talking specifically about, like, the average rank of play. I would probably put him at the bottom of A and maybe even the top of B. Like, I think, like, these characters get better the lower in rank you go. And this character gets better the higher in rank you go. So yeah, just something to keep in mind when I'm putting this list together. I'm trying to make this list so that it helps people from all ranks, but I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm just trying my best. And at the end of the day, keep in mind, these lists are mostly for fun and to understand why things are working. It's not really about what you should play or what you should not play. Next up is Wrecking Ball, and Wrecking Ball is still just kind of in a weird spot. He's just really, really odd. There's a lot of characters that shut down this character. There's a lot of characters that prevent you from playing the game. But if you have a full dive composition or hit scans that can follow up on your slams, the character can work. The character can be fine. And especially if the enemies don't have anything that counters you, you can kind of just do whatever you want, right? And it's just a really just weird character overall. I'm not going to say he's unplayable, but I just think he's just worse than so many other characters at enabling dives or being disruptive. The only thing that he kind of really provides that I think is unique compared to, like, a stronger dive character like Winston, right? Winston's very, very strong, but Winston is far more greedy for resources. You can't keep a Winston alive with, like, Brig Zen, but you could do that with the ball. You could play, like, a Brig Zen ball, Tracer, Sombra comp if you wanted to, and that would actually be okay. So in a game where you have a really weird support composition that doesn't provide you a lot, you have, like, a Mercy pocketing a flyer with a Zen, and you're like, all right, like, ball can actually be your saving grace. So, but yeah, overall, I think I actually wouldn't suggest playing ball this season more than a lot of seasons. Sombra's really good right now, and yeah, ball's gonna have a really hard time dealing with Mays and Reapers and Cassidy's. It's just a frustrating time for ball, to be honest with you. Zarya is another character that I think is way, way stronger the lower in rank you go. When players are not focusing her down, not punishing her lack of bubbles, and especially when characters like Tracer aren't cracked. Like, Tracer is really, really good against Zarya, puts a lot of pressure against Zarya, pressures out her bubbles, can pulse bomb her, things like that. But really what separates Zarya from being great or okay really comes down to the map. Like, Zarya's a character that is very map dependent. So Zarya is bad on maps that have a really far effective range. So when there's really long sight lines, Zarya has a hard time closing in the gap there. And so she's going to get outranged. She's really a close range character. And she's also really bad against high ground. So, you know, Numbani first, Numbani second, these are pretty hard for her. But if you think of, like, Numbani third, all of a sudden it's pretty close range and it's pretty flat. So now Zarya becomes really, really powerful. So knowing where she's good and where you can get value on her against certain characters and compositions, I think is kind of the key to playing Zarya. But because even in those longer ranges and in a lot of situations, players don't play optimally against the Zarya the lower in rank you go. That's why Zarya becomes better and better and better. Like, as an example, let's say we take Numbani first, right? Ideally, if you go and take point as Zarya on Numbani first, players would just stay on the high ground, poke you out, maybe give up a tick, kill you, right? They'll just win a fight. They'll build up ultimates before y'all. They'll win a couple of fights, snowball, whatever the case may be. But what will often happen the lower rank you go, players will make mistakes into you. They'll freak out when you touch point. You can force them to objectives a lot easier. You can make enemies play into you a lot more, and players are going to charge you up a lot easier as well. So there's a lot of little mistakes that people make that make Zarya better and better. But still, if I take like the average overall, I think Zarya is good in high and low elo. I'm actually going to put her at the bottom of A. I'm going to put her right here above Rein. I think that's a good place for her. And this is a pretty reasonable tank tier list right now. If I were to say there's any character that I'm a little questioning my placement of, I would most likely say it's the Roadhog. You could make an argument that Roadhog deserves bottom of A. I really just don't think that players are losing to Roadhogs as much as they have been before. I think overall, the community has learned to deal with Roadhogs a lot better. And unless you're a really, really cracked Roadhog and you're not missing your hooks, you're going to have a hard time against a lot of characters in this meta. And yeah, so I'm going to kind of stand by that. But let me know if you agree or disagree with my tank tier list down below. Okay, now we're doing the DPS. And in alphabetical order, we're starting off with Ashe. Ashe is just insanely strong. Probably the best DPS in the hit scan category right now. Really strong, really consistent, just has a great range and is good against divers, good in a poke. You could play it even with like a more flexible composition, and hell, you can even play her with dive technically. If you have a dive tank and another dive DPS, you can just aid the fight from like an off angle, like an aggressive one. I think because Ashe is so flexible and so strong, she is just one of the best DPS to be good at in this meta. She really doesn't have a lot of bad matchups. I would probably say her worst matchup is Widowmaker, undoubtedly Widowmaker. But against most other characters, I think she has good game against, whether you're up against a flyer, whether you're up against something untraditional like a Sim, a Torb, or whatever, or whether you're just dueling like Cassidy's, you have a huge advantage there. I think that overall, I'm going to actually put Ashe in the S tier. I don't think that she's like a crazy dominant S tier, right? Like she's not like far and away an S tier. It's just kind of like she's just the best of all the many options. So I'm putting her in the S tier. So like the distance between her and another A tier, like let's say between her and Cass is going to be in the A tier, spoiler alert. It's not that far. It's not that far apart. And I would definitely put the distance between D.Va and Rein like crazy far apart. So yeah, the DPS as a whole, they're a lot closer together than the tanks are and even the supports are in value. And the distance between the S tier and the next tier, not a lot different. They're a lot more condensed and close together. Just keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about Bastion. Bastion is always going to be pretty niche. There are going to be situations where he thrives, right? There's going to be situations where he's great, situations where he gets a crazy amount of value, but there's going to be a whole bunch of other situations he doesn't do anything, right? And I think walking out of spawn with Bastion is just a gamble. Most of the time, there are some tanks that are just not going to care about what you do. Doom does not care about what you do. Orisa can javelin you, doesn't really care about what you do. Characters like D.Va do not care. Sigma can LOS, doesn't care. But there are some characters that are going to have a rough time. Zarya is going to have a rough time. Winston's going to have a rough time. Ramattra might have a little bit of a rough time. So it's going to depend, right? You're kind of gambling a little bit, but there are also a lot of DPS you have to deal with. There's a lot of divers that are really good against you, like Genji Tracer, Sombra. There's a lot of supports that are hard to deal with. So yeah, as much as I think Bastion can be good, he's more of a, I'm going to swap to him in a certain situation against a certain comp, not I'm going to main him. So I'm going to put him in the C tier. Might be a little controversial. Maybe you don't like that, but yeah, I don't think that he's ever going to be a meta tier character. And I think that's probably a good thing. I don't really think anyone wants like a Bastion meta. And if you think you do, I don't think you've ever played in a Bastion meta, because I promise you it's not... It loses its charm really fast, to be honest with you. Okay, let's talk about Cass. Cass, I think, is an A tier, a solid A tier character. He's good in a lot of comps. He's just really good at just dealing with just a lot of just random characters. Now, I honestly think that the Hinder change has made him... It's actually made Hinder stronger, I think. Just having a higher amount of burst damage is actually pretty strong. And the fact that he has high health total is also good. He's pretty survivable against a lot of things. So he's good reasonably against divers. A lot of skill-based matchups, but he's good against like Sombra Tracer. He's good against a lot of the flyers. He's good against a lot of the nonsense, you know, characters like Junkrat and just, you know, Torb or whatever. He's fine against these characters. Like, he can pretty much play against anything. The only place he really struggles against is characters like Widowmaker that outrange him. those characters really he struggles against most. And Ashe can also be a little bit frustrating as well. But one of the things that you're going to see a lot on Cass is if you have good aim, you're going to punish these Junos all over the place. These Junos fly back and forth like in the middle of the air, and they think they can't die, and you can just destroy them as Cass. Like, it's actually really easy to punish these Junos. So yeah, I think the combination of a lot of things, the fact that Cass plays really well, whether you're playing like a diva, you can play him with a diva, you can play him with a jungle queen, a Zarya, a Rein. There's a lot. And one of the things that I actually think is super underrated about Cass is his fan the hammer. Like, fan the hammer more. I'm telling you right now, fan the hammer is extremely strong, and there's a lot of tanks that deserve to just get eaten up because they are in a bad position. Like, if a tank like a Winston jumps in and messes up the bubble and it jumps in too deep, fan the hammer, roll fan the hammer. Like, just punish these tanks for doing dumb things because they think they're invincible. Cass can actually do that. I'm going to put Cass in the A tier. I think he's a really reasonable character to play right now. Echo has kind of fallen down. There was a little while back that I put Echo really high up in my tier list. And I think Echo's still strong. Ultimate's still strong. Still has assassin potential. But Diva, really, really annoying character to deal with on Echo. All these hit scans, really, really strong and good at dealing with Echo. And the health nerf to Echo has been really felt because now divers are really scary threats. Like, when we talk about Sombra and Tracer, you fly down, these characters can one-clip you like a lot easier. That little bit of health goes a long way. And yeah, Echo's having a little bit of a rough time right now. I don't think she's unplayable. I really do think that you just need to be either really skilled on the character or you need to have like a very specific comp to make the character great. I'm going to put the character in B tier. I think she's reasonable, but not at her best right now. Genji. Now, this one's going to be crazy controversial. I actually think Genji's really good right now. And you might not agree. You might be like, what the hell, Matt? Why do you think Genji is good right now? And I actually think he is. I think Genji is good. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Number one, Genji just destroys Cass right now. Cass used to have game against Genji, but doesn't really. Because all you have to do right now as Genji is just be extra aggressive against the Cass. Dash a Cass. If he freaking stuns you and you don't you don't even have to reflect the stun. You just like int into him. And if he stuns you, you just deflect. Like, that's super simple. A lot of times you'll be able to deflect the stun. You can threaten a lot of characters as Genji right now. Ashe is played a lot. Ana's are really, really easy to threaten. You have good matchups against Kiriko. You have good matchups against Juno. Like, a lot of these characters are actually pretty easy for you to threaten and put a lot of pressure against. And against characters like Sombra and Tracer, the thing that I would suggest, if you want to get value as Genji and you're up against like a Sombra Tracer that keeps eating up your backline, you just need to mark these characters. I can't tell you how strong it is to just be able to force these characters away. If a Sombra pops into your backline and you're just playing peel, playing to mark, they try to teleport away, you chase them down, you kill them. If a Tracer's ever in your backline, you dash a Tracer, force their recall. If you can just get a Tracer out of your backline, they have to reset up. Make them constantly reset up. You're just wasting one dash. You're just using one dash. You're going to get it back right away. And yeah, I think a combination of Genji just kind of fitting a lot of this mobility comp. Also, Genji is really good with Winston. He's also pretty good with Junker Queen. He's also pretty good against characters like Rein, pretty good against characters like Diva, pretty good against characters like Hog. So you combine all these factors together, and I actually think that Genji is pretty reasonable right now. And some people are going to be like, what the hell? Why is Genji reasonable? But I actually think he is. I actually think this is one of the better seasons that we've seen for Genji, and I always would love to play Genji alongside like a Sombra or a Tracer. I'm going to put Genji in the bottom of A tier. He's probably going to be in the way bottom by the time we're done, but I think he's substantially better than Echo is right now. Okay, next up is Hanzo. And yeah, I know that a lot of people are going to be like, hey, Hanzo got his 250 headshot back. That's a really big deal for Hanzo. Hanzo's good again. He was unplayable before, and now he's all of a sudden good. I'm going to tell you right now that Hanzo is somehow worse than he was before he could headshot 250. And you might be like, okay, this is just another Hanzo main bitching about Hanzo. But I don't know why Blizzard has an obsession with changing things that feel fundamental to the character. Like the internal clock of knocking a bow to full power. They ruined that. They've changed it to where you can't knock a bow and wall climb. They've changed all these different things. And I think it's really hard to get back in the groove of Hanzo. But more importantly than anything, it's harder to hit Hanzo's shots than a lot of other characters right now. He is a character that still cannot one-shot the characters that he really wants to one-shot. Like, historically, Hanzo was really, really great against characters like Reaper, really, really great against characters like Cass, really great against characters like Mei, really great against characters like Torb, and he's just not. He's not great against any of these characters at all. He's not great at all against these characters. And yeah, he can one-shot, headshot, like a lot of like supports are the things that he can now one-shot, headshot, which is like reasonable, but he fires at such a slower pace that his overall DPS throughout the course of a round is a lot lower. He really just feels like a character that doesn't have a great identity. I think he's so much worse at Ashe than Ashe at doing like basically the same thing. And if you're gonna play Hanzo, I really think the best place to play him is really the long range sniper maps. But even still, I don't think that Hanzo is really that good. Now, if you're the absolute GOAT and you're somehow able to hit every headshot in the world, then more power to you. But I really do think that Hanzo is actually in just as bad, if not a worse state than he was before the changes. Next character we got to talk about is Junkrat. Junkrat is a character that is actually reasonable. It's just going to kind of depend on the situations you're playing him in. Now, I always have a hard time placing Junkrats because, once again, Junkrat's a character of mastery. And if you get really good at this character, you can make him work. Like, there's a lot of Junkrats in top 500. Junkrats can just make, like, they can just make magic happen. If you learn some rollouts, some lineups, whatever. But like for a general person, like Junkrat on defense around choke points is going to be good just to play in general. And then if you get really talented at him, you can definitely make him work in a lot of situations. I think he's reasonable, but he's always going to be niche, right? So like I could put him in the C tier as a character that I think is like just niche automatically. But as far as like his potential, like he could realistically hang with B and A tier characters. The next character we got to talk about is Mei, and I actually think Mei is really strong right now. There's a lot of characters that she's really good against, especially in the tanking category. Any character that you can wall off if you have follow-up is really strong. So characters like Zarya, characters like Ryan, characters like Roadhog being able to stop his hook, Junker Queen, all these characters are really great to wall off. And then if you're playing like a really close together, more brawl-esque composition, then Mei is really good at denying characters like D.Va. Like D.Va cannot ever punish a Mei. She's not going to be able to fly into a Mei very easily. Mei's going to be able to punish her and force her away. And then like characters like Tracer, you can actually threaten with your Icicle. Not going to be able to kill them instantly, but still going to be able to threaten them. And I really want to make it clear how important it is that Mei has 300 goddamn health. You're never going to just instantly die. You're really, really hard to punish and get killed. And you get to heal yourself too with a wall. Like, you're basically like a secondary tank. And especially in this meta, there's a lot of characters that you feel like you just get deleted on. You're like Cass, you're like on an off angle, or your Soldier, you're on an off angle, and then you just get like chased down by a D.Va and just murdered. And you're like, what the hell? Mei is not going to do that. Mei is going to allow you to consistently play the game. And I think she's really, really strong in the right hands. So I'm going to put her in A tier. I think she's above Genji. She's really reasonable, really strong. So yeah. Pharah. Pharah is a great character in the right situation and a terrible character when you're not in the right situation. And it's not really hit scans that are going to threaten you the most. It's really D.Va gives you a hard time, or a support comp that doesn't really kind of enable it. It also depends on the map. Like, you really want to be able to play high ground. You really want to be able to play with line of sight. And oftentimes you have to play really low ground and really fight a lot of like corners and things like that. You can't just fly skybox. I really did make a Pharah guide quite a while back. It's a little outdated, so I might remake it at some point, but it still gives you a lot of the fundamentals on the character. I think the character is good to whip out, especially when you're like trying to take first points of certain things and players are playing like a really difficult composition to break through. Characters like Brig, Torb, Sim, Junkrat. She's really, really good there. And one of the most underrated aspects of Pharah is that you can bully tanks like a lot. Constantly spamming into characters like Junker Queen, spamming into characters like Zarya, and getting your ult and just ulting them. Like, deleting them out of the game is really, really strong. I'm actually going to put Pharah in the middle of B tier. I think she's actually a really good pick right now. Reaper. Reaper is a character that he's just really thriving right now. Like, a lot. And it's because of speed, for one. Like, Juno speeding him in, great. He's really good with a lot of these brawl compositions that are getting enabled by this massive amounts of speed all the goddamn time. He actually just has good matchups against a lot of DPS. The characters that he has like the most struggling time with are characters that can just outrange him. So characters like Ashe can be a little frustrating to deal with. Flyers can be a little frustrating, but he has a lot of health. He's going to be able to tank a lot of different things. He's not going to be able to get pushed or prodded by characters like D.Va, and being able to not die to a D.Va or Winston jumping on you, huge deal. And yeah, he just goes in with his tanks. They create space for him. He shreds other tanks. He punishes tanks that are out of position. He creates a lot of 1v1 opportunities. I think, I don't exactly know what was the thing that made Reaper good all of a sudden, but, you know, a switch kind of flipped on a little while back, and now the character is actually really, really strong. I'm going to put him above Mei, but below Cassidy in A tier. Sojourn is another character that is kind of struggling. I don't think this character is terrible by any means, but she's just not really that great in her category compared to like a character like Ashe, for instance. I think that Ashe is just better at doing a very similar thing, because Sojourn, Hanzo, and Ashe, they kind of have similar play styles, not exactly the same, of course, but if we're talking about how they stack up, Sojourn is definitely way better than Hanzo, but also way worse than Ashe. I'm going to put Sojourn in the B tier. I think somewhere in the B tier. Don't exactly know where. Reasonable character, but with enough nerfs that have hit this character, we're kind of seeing Sojourn starting to like not be the greatest character in the game. And I think that's fine. This character was dominant, especially in the high elos, for way too long. So, yeah, I think it's reasonable that this character is now back down in B. Soldier. Soldier is hard to place once again. There's a lot to like about him, especially if we're talking about like underneath the diamond rank, because he's independent. He has good mobility, and you can kind of play him in a lot of different compositions. But he's really susceptible to dive. He gets feasted on by joint dives, by Sombras and Tracers. He's really, really bad against Divas. A lot of tanks just bully him. He doesn't have great burst damage. He doesn't really have a great way to stay alive or get away. He's getting feasted on by a lot of things. Outranged by Ashe, bursted down by Cass, jumped on by Genji. So yeah, it's a little hard, a rough time. I do think though he's still good, especially when we can play maps that have high ground or off angles. And if we talking about like the average rank, I do think that he's good generally. So I think he's really all that good right now. And as a hit scan option, I think there's other characters that are better. Sombra is a character that I just think is insane right now and probably still underplayed. We saw a period of time where she was really buffed and then they nerfed her really quickly, but still fan-freaking-tastic. So goddamn strong. If you hack someone and hit them with your virus and just shoot them a little bit, they're pretty much dead. Almost every single support in the game is dead. Even tanks getting hacked and hit with the virus, it's a really, really rough time. Being able to abuse minis and hack them and fight duels on minis, being able to favorably interact with a lot of different tanks that harass them. There's a lot of supports that just cannot play the game around you. You could punish characters really, really easily. Characters like Kiriko, you can chase them down. Junos, you can just win that duel every single time. Mercies, you can chase down. Zens, don't even get me started. Like, Sombra is really great, and she pairs super, super well with Tracer, who's also really, really great. I'm going to put Sombra in the bottom of S tier. I think she's that good. I think she's really, really strong. And whether you're playing her with a D.Va or against a D.Va, whether you're playing her with a Winston, or, yeah, any map that has verticality, and if you develop your tracking on this character, she's just so deadly, so strong. Yeah, I just think she's fantastic. So I'm going to put her up in the S tier. Sim's another character that's really hard to place. I probably need to talk to a Sim main about this character because I think that she's similar to Junkrat, right? Where if you're really, really good with her, you can make her work. I definitely see a lot less of her than Junkrat. So maybe there's just more Junkrat fans, or maybe she's just struggling a little bit. She's a little hard to play. I'm not entirely sure why, but she's definitely not a meta tier character. She's not picked very often. She does have some strengths, I think, with the setups and the teleports, and she's good at either doing like a sort of dive interpretation where you do some TP bombs, or kind of denying space around certain choke points. So I think on some maps she can actually be good, and if you're using the teleport creatively and you know, coordinating with your team, it can be good. But oftentimes you're not going to be able to live long enough to get these big beams, and while her ultimate's really, really strong, I do think that she has some matchups that are just really, really hard to deal with. I'm going to put her in the C tier as well, a little bit behind Bastion. Definitely still stronger than Hanzo, though. Don't get me started on Hanzo. Torb is a character that I think is really strong. He's really beefy, Really, really beefy, good in poke compositions, hard to interact with, but there are still some characters that can kind of abuse him. A lot of characters can either, you know, shut him down in a 1v1 or neutralize him by breaking his turret. He does actually need like the right amount of support. Some compositions are going to enable him really, really well, and others he's going to kind of be out high and dry. His turret's going to get dealt with really easily. Like, you're up against some long distance compositions, they just don't care. They can break your turret every single time. All you are is like a really, really big target that that you have extra health, but you're way easier to hit. So I'm not saying he's bad by any means, but I don't necessarily think he's like insane right now. Doesn't have great mobility, and you know, being able to stay alive or have great mobility is really, really important. You either need to outrange your competition or find a way to sustain getting dove on, or you can run away. I'm going to put him at the top of B. You could make an argument that he's the bottom of A, but I'm going to put him at the top of B for now. Last up in the DPS tier, we have Tracer, surprising no one. I'm putting Tracer at the top of the S tier. Another character that's really hard to place in these tier lists because, you know, Tracer requires a lot of skill to get the full value out of her. So, like, she kind of, you know, if we started in bronze, right, she would be F. And then, like, as people get better, she climbs, right? But that's not true with every character. Like, not every character climbs as people get better in the tier list, but Tracer does. So I'm going to put her in the S tier because of that. And because, you know, when we think about the meta play, Tracer is insanely good for a lot of reasons, and I want you to know why she's so good. She gets to stay alive and not be threatened by tanks. And especially if we think about this season and, you know, basically every season since season 9, tanks are raid bosses on the battlefield that your position needs to be dictated by their position almost at all times. If you're in a position that can be punished by a tank, you're in a bad position. So, you know, this is why a lot of people have a really frustrating time with characters like D.Va, because she has such a huge range of motion. She has such a huge area that is like, this is my domain, and if you're playing in this position, I can punish you. And that's really frustrating because that's the area that you need to be in. That's the area that you need to operate from and get kills from. So, yeah, it could be kind of frustrating. But with all that being said, Tracer just doesn't have to follow those rules. Tracer can play in any positions that she wants to play in. And it's really, really hard to flush a Tracer out, because if you try to flush her out as a one character, she could duel you, or she could play keep away forever. If you try to flush her out with two characters and she stalls long enough, her team is going to get a huge advantage from that, and she's almost always going to be able to run away. So Tracer just gets to occupy positions that no other character can stay in, never will get pushed, and if you play well, won't get punished. Has really high uptime, great dueling potential, can fight and add pressure to any team fight, punish kills that are low, and carry games with pulse bombs. I mean, Tracer just does so much, and she's really good with and against characters like Winston and D.Va. You can play her with Junker Queen, and yeah, I think Tracer's just phenomenal, and a character that if you're trying to master any one character, Tracer is probably just the best character to get good at out of any character in the game, and it's probably been like that for the entirety of Overwatch 1 and 2, to be honest with you. Next up, we do got to talk about Venture, and Venture is a tricky one to place because I don't think that a lot of people are playing them to their biggest potential, right? Still a relatively new character. People are still trying to figure out how Venture plays, but being able to not be punished by a lot of tanks, super, super important. And being able to bully a lot of tanks and have good matchups against some things, whether you're playing with a dive, and being able to play really well with a dive, and being able to play like a different style depending on the type of composition you're in. I think all of that flexibility and all that potential comes together to make Venture, I would say, a unoptimistic A. You could maybe argue top of B, but I'm gonna say that Venture is a bottom of A character, and the character has a lot of potential when people get really, really good at them. So yeah, especially when you can punish a lot of tanks, I think that's a really, really big deal. And any DPS that could do that is definitely going to thrive right now. So yeah, I'm going to put them in the bottom of A tier. Last but certainly not least, we have Widowmaker. And Widowmaker's still freaking phenomenal. There's a lot of maps that Widowmaker can just completely take over, raid boss these maps. All the long distance maps are really, really good for Widowmaker. All the maps that Sigma's good in, Widowmaker's good in. There are characters that can kind of shut you down and make it so you can't play the game. You know, a lot of divers going around, a lot of mobility going around. So I'm going to put Widowmaker in the A tier, but I think Widowmaker is strong enough that it's worth playing, but trying to one-trick Widowmaker can be really hard. Characters like Sombra being really good, characters like Tracer being really good. I mean, it's going to be a really hard time for you to get value out of this character, but sniping Junos all day, Alaria's all day, Ana's all day, Ashe's all day. You know, there's a lot of really, really great matchups for Widowmaker as well, so you can't completely ignore those things. Yeah, I'm gonna put Widow in the A tier. Still a really great character, very dependent on your positioning and mechanical skill, but if you got those, you could pop the hell off on this character. Now, last up, but certainly not least, we got to talk about the supports. And once again, in alphabetical order, we're gonna start with Ana. And Ana is really strong, but also vulnerable. Ana is going to be really, really great at enabling the greedy tanks that want a lot of heals. Characters like Zarya, characters like Rein, characters like Winston, even Diva. These are all characters that want a lot of burst heals, and Ana can provide those things while also providing a lot of other pieces of utility. There's a lot of great things about Ana, but Ana's also vulnerable. There's characters like Genjis, there's characters like Tracers and freaking Sombras, and even Ashes, all threatening Ana. So Ana is kind of a sink or swim. I would say this is a sink or swim season for Ana, where you could definitely get a lot of value out of this character, but you have to play extremely well, position really well, and know how to pick your battles. You can't be wasting cooldowns when you need them. You can't be throwing out sleeps and nades aggressively when you have a diver lurking around on an off angle. Being extremely aware on Ana is really important. Mechanically being good on Ana is really important. But Nano's really strong. Nade's really strong. Sleep's really strong. There's a lot about Ana that's really, really strong right now. So yeah, I think the character is extremely powerful. But there are going to be situations where I think it's probably best for you to swap off if you are being really targeted, if you do not have the help and support of a teammate that is peeling for you. I'm going to put Ana in the A tier, though. Still a really great character. And as we know, the most picked support by a mile. So regardless of where she is on a power level scale, you're still gonna face against a lot of Anas. There's a lot of Anas everywhere. Baptiste, another character that is really, really strong, provides a lot of damage, provides a lot of sustain, really, really hard to dive. So I think with Bab, you're kind of trading a little bit of that offensive power, especially with Nade. Nade is so strong right now. Being able to anti something can kill it really, really easily. So trading that is a big deal, but Bap is so much harder to dive and interact with than Ana is. Yeah, I mean, I would even say he's not weak. He's not weak to most dives at all. A super coordinated dive, he can definitely be the target. But in most situations, having great mobility, having a self-heal, having the ability to make himself immortal, and just outputting a ton of damage. There's a lot about him that's good. I think his ultimate is quite a bit worse than Ana, and yeah, I even though he has pretty good utility, it's not going to be as impactful as something like Nade, but still, Bap is great. And he's a great character to swap to when you're being too highly pressured. He's a great character to enable a lot of brawl. He's really good at feeding a lot of these really greedy tanks. And overall, I'm actually going to put him in the A tier as well. I think he's a really reasonable and strong support. He kind of, trades some offensive capabilities, some playmaking capabilities for extra survivability, which depending on the situation, that can be great. And honestly, if you're going to play like any one support, if you were going to one-trick a support all the way to Grandmaster or Champ or whatever, I'd probably say Baptiste is the one that is going to give you the least amount of frustration, going to be good in the most amount of situations. Now, the third support in the list is Brig, and Brig is just so goddamn strong. Really, really good at neutralizing a lot of the dive that is being played right now. There's a lot of freaking dive that is being played, and Brig is just good at shutting that down, whether that's Diva, whether that's Winston, whether that's, Tracer, Sombra. Now, for the highest ranks of play, I would say that Brig is probably not as high as I'm about to place her. For even semi-high ranks of play, and then every other rank, I think Brig is just the best support to play in most situations because she provides so much. She lives, for one. Brig can stay alive, protect people, and keep teammates alive. Very, very important. Ultimate is extremely good at baiting people in and kind of turning a fight that you're losing or about to lose. And yeah, so if I take all the ranks combined, I would put her in the S tier. I would definitely put her in the S tier. Now, if we were just talking about like higher elos, I would probably just put her only in the A. Briggs can also be targeted and dove upon and punished, but you need a little bit of coordination to make that happen. And yeah, this doesn't mean play like a psychopath Brig that just kind of runs it down and tanks it out. But yeah, Brig really, really great, really, really strong, and just good at dealing with a lot of like a lot of what is being meta right now, I think Brig is really good. And then also being able to protect characters like Ana from everything trying to kill her. If you can keep your Ana alive, oftentimes it will just win you the game. So yeah. Illari is the next character we got to talk about. Illari is really strong in some situations, but a little lacking in others. She's good because she can create picks and help her DPS control off angles, and that's great. That's fantastic. But the amount of utility that she provides comparatively to characters like BAP and characters like Ana, it can really become apparent over the course of a long game where Ana's nade can carry a fight. You know, Baptiste's immortality field can save a player, and Illari can in some situations, but there are going to be some times where her heal thing is being destroyed non-stop. She's getting threatened, she's being kept in check by a lot of other DPS, and then she's not able to create as many mid-fight plays as some of these other supports. So I'm going to put her in the B tier overall. She's good. I don't really think that she's worth how good you have to be to play her, though. Like, if you're mechanical enough to play Illari, I think there's other supports that you can get more value out of. Now, this next one, hard to place, for sure. Juno. Juno's really hard to place. When Juno first came out, everyone thought that this character was terrible. Turns out, we were all wrong. We were all really, really wrong. And, yeah, it seems like this support is insane. Based on pick rate right now, you have to put the character in S tier because she's being picked like non-freaking stop. But I don't quite know if she is quite S tier. And hear me out. I know that Juno is really good at like speed boosting characters like freaking Diva onto people and just deleting them. Good with characters like Grind. Good at playing with dive characters. And I think there's a lot of potential there with Juno. But Junos are also punishable. There's a lot of characters that can punish a Juno. Juno can't really fight back that easily in a direct 1v1, so she's vulnerable as well. But I think the character is just good enough that she provides a ton to a lot of fights, and she's played a ton, and we'll have to see where she settles. But right now, I mean, you're going to see a Juno in basically every game you play. And the character has legs, is very strong. So is she going to end up being stronger than characters like BAP and Ana in a meta down the line? I'm not 100% sure. Metas change over time. But right now, in this environment, she definitely is an S tier character based on pick rate and how powerful she is. Great ultimate, great speed boost. And yeah, character's really, really good. Now, this is where things get a little tricky because I think a lot of supports are great. Like, there's a lot of really, really great supports, and it's hard to place them all. Like Kiriko, for instance. Kiriko is still freaking great. Really, really good. Suzu's still strong. Mobility's really good. Like, I want to put Kiriko in S tier. We're kind of stacking the S tier. But I actually will. I'll put Kiriko in the S tier, but I want to make a couple of caveats here. So, characters like Brig, I think, get better as you go down in rank. Still good in high rank, but better in average ranks, and the lower you go, the better they get. Juno, I think reasonably good no matter what rank you're playing. Definitely really reasonably good. But Kiriko is similar to Tracer in that the character gets better the higher in rank you get. The character is mechanical, based on timing. Like, it's really easy to make a great play. Teleport in, save a teammate, kill the person, right? That can be a terrible play if you mistime it. Teleport in, don't save anybody, waste your Suzu, die. Like, it's really easy for that to just be a lost play. And I do think that Kiriko is like, as you climb, she gets better and better. And still a really great character. But unfortunately, Juno is eating some of her pick rate, although we're seeing some of that, the synergy where they're playing together. So I think Kiriko is still really strong. I'm still going to put her in the S tier category. But it's really hard to place supports because I think all of them are really, really good in different situations. They're all really, really nuts. Or at least the ones that I'm placing here. Like, all of these 5 are insane. And there's still one more that is also insane. Actually, there's 2 more that is still insane. Like, supports are really, really insane. And all of them are good in different situations. And I think all of them are perfectly reasonable and viable. There are a couple supports, though, that I don't think are very good at all. But we'll talk about those right now, actually, with Lifeweaver. I think Lifeweaver is substantially weaker than most supports in the game. And this doesn't mean that Lifeweaver is unplayable. I think that Lifeweaver can be, and there's some synergies that you can do, some setups with pools, and Tree is still a great ultimate, and Lifeweaver is really hard to dive, which is something, you know, reasonably good. But I would say that some of the utility that other supports provide is just noticeably more impactful than what Lifeweaver does. Like, pool can be good, But when we think about like, you know, Pax and Whip, when we think about Suzu, when we think about Nade, Immortality Field, freaking speed boost on Lucio and Juno, you start to see like the mid-fight playmaking capabilities of Lifeweaver just don't exist. Doesn't mean the character can't get a lot of value, but I will say that Lifeweaver almost completely falls off as you start to climb the ladder. Character does have a lot of weaknesses. I don't think that you're gonna, like, you could still carry on this character. You could still pop off and do a lot of things, but yeah, noticeably worse than a lot of other supports right now. And it's really just kind of a testament to just how strong supports are. There are so many good supports right now. Brig, Kiriko, Anabap, freaking Juno. There's just so many. It's hard. And I'm gonna put Lifeweaver in the C tier. Lucio, another character. I feel like I should maybe put Lucio in the S tier as well. He's super strong too. Like, all these supports are really, really great. I'm gonna put him at the top of A. I mean, honestly, all the supports in S and A, like, just combine them all. They're all just amazing. Like, they're all just freaking great. No one's going to say that Bap is bad. No one's going to say that Brig is bad. No one's going to say that Lucio's bad. Like, all these characters are really, really good. They're just fighting for each other's pick rate. Like, we're kind of in a situation where they're just so competitive with each other. They all provide different things. Lucio's great in dive. You could play Lucio with a Juno. You could play Lucio with, you know, a traditional, like, Lucio Kiriko, Lucio Ana. Lucio's really great too. Being able to go in with the dive, being able to get active, speed in his team. I think there's a little bit of competition with him because Juno can speed in and play with a traditional brawl. So like, you can speed in a Rhine with the Juno. You don't need a Lucio in some situations, right? So he does take a small hit there because there's another character that can do some of the same things that he did, and you don't necessarily need that, right? So like the Diva Juno speedy boost combo, they're really, really good. You don't really want to necessarily have a Lucio with that, or you don't need one. You could have an Ana or something else that provides mid-fight, you know, some type of mid-fight play. Doesn't mean that Juno's better than Lucio or anything like that. It's just that his pick rate is being competed with. Where there was some comps that needed a Lucio. Like, if you're playing a Rhine comp, you really should have that with a Lucio. But you didn't always have that with a Lucio, but you should have. Now you can, like, play that with a Juno, and then you don't need a Lucio. So I think Lucio's still really great, good as ever. But there's just, you know, there's other combinations of supports that you might see a little bit more now. So that's why I'm putting him in A. Mercy, I'm going to put Mercy in B tier. See, the thing about Mercy is Mercy does have characters that she enables reasonably well. You know, a lot of the flyers pretty well. Characters like Ashe, decently well. But she is going to be the target of a lot of dives. There's a lot of Tracers and Sombras that are going to punish the Mercy. Divas are going to punish the Mercy, can constantly make it so that Mercy's not healing, can chase Mercy down. And right now, pocketing is kind of just not that great because supports just are providing so much that you got to think about what you're giving up. Like, Mercy pocketing a DPS, right? You're like that's the optimal situation, right? A lot of times is there's a really insane DPS that is getting pocketed. That's really not worth giving up all the crazy utility of one of these many supports. Like, there's just so many busted supports that it's really hard to justify not playing one of them over a Mercy. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't win with the Mercy. This doesn't mean that a Mercy can't pop off and carry, but Mercy mains will tell you that for the past couple of seasons, past 4 or 5 seasons, Mercy has been struggling, and I think that while she is playable, there's just more optimal characters, or there's more powerful characters that make it harder and harder to justify picking Mercy, and especially with all the hyper mobility, Mercy and a pocketed DPS are kind of, they're victims of that because they could be the dive target. Mercy's not going to be able to get that res. Like, Mercy wants to play a poke game where every kill that happens on every time one of her teammates get killed, she can just res it for free. That's not really going to happen when people are jumping in and diving in and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm going to put her in the B tier. I think she's still way better than Lifeweaver. I'm just a Lifeweaver hater. Everyone kind of knows that by now. If you've seen any of my other tier lists, I hate Lifeweaver. But yeah. Moira just got a mega buff with the ultimate. Really big deal. Moira also goes in with a lot of dive compositions. But there is some downsides to Moira. I think, number one, Moira is going to be someone that still has a reasonably hard time against Divas. Divas could eat your orbs, and that could be a little frustrating. Moira also is not really that great at peeling. She's good at living, and I think she's better at being aggressive than she is being passive. So if you're playing like an all-in dive composition, then she could be great. You know, like a freaking Lucio Moira composition with the Tracer Sombra. Like, in a situation where she doesn't have to peel. She doesn't have to help her teammates. she's amazing. Really wants to be stepping on the gas, really wants to be aggressive. In PO environments, she doesn't do just as well. She doesn't really want to waste a lot of her time and resources just sitting in the back line healing her team. That's not what she wants to do. She wants to be aggressive. She wants to be tempo positive. She wants to be in the fight, right? But if she's in the fight and her Ana keeps dying, then that's really bad. So I think she's really, really strong, but it depends on the composition. I could put her at the top of B, but I think she's actually a fair bit better than Alari. I'm going to put her at the bottom of A, and I think that's a reasonable place to put her. Now we do got to talk about Zen. And Zen is a character that is feast or famine, like really time feast or famine. Some comps he's going to shred. Some situations he's going to shred. In a poke war between two tanks against characters like Ram and Mauga and yeah, I mean, in a lot of situations he's going to be great. In poke, poke offs between Sigmas, he's going to be great. But then against hypermobile compositions, he's going to have a terrible time. So while Zen, I think, is really strong, really, really strong in the right situations, he's a character that you need to be quick to swap off of, depending on the map, depending on the situation, depending on the enemy comp. Because you could get farmed over and over and over again. You could get spawn camped. And I would say that if you want to have a great time playing Zen, you don't want to play Zen all the time, if that makes sense. I'm going to put him above Alari. I actually think he brings more to the table. Yeah, basically, like, these two characters are here, like, right next to each other for different reasons. Alari is always reasonably strong, but her peaks aren't that high. Like, her max value is not that high. Zen has much higher max value, but much lower low value, okay? Does that make sense? I hope it does. But anyways, this is my mid-season patch tier list. I'm going to hope that they don't hotfix it. If this is out and you're listening to me right now, they did not hotfix it, because I made like a tier list that I felt like was my best tier list ever. And it got hotfixed like instantly, and I was very sad. So anyways, I hope you actually see this. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my picks down below. I want to hear your reasoning. And yeah, so yeah, just let me know. Anyways, thank you so much for coming by. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, do me a solid and smash that subscribe button. If not, no worries. Just let me know down below what kind of video I could make to earn that sub from you, and I would appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.